Welcome back to PMSR. You thought those 5 pickup lines were bad? We're just getting started. Today, I've got 5 more that are somehow even worse, and each one reveals something darker about the person using them. If the last batch taught you to trust your gut, this one's going to teach you to trust it faster. Let's go. This one happened at a coffee shop. A guy noticed a woman had AirPods in, walked up and said, "What are you listening to? Because I'd love to be the soundtrack to your life." Now, on the surface, that's just aggressively cheesy, the kind of line that makes you cringe but maybe smile despite yourself. Except he didn't stop there. When she politely took out one earbud and said, "Just a podcast," he asked which one. She told him, "Some true crime show." His response is, "Oh, you're into dark stuff. That's hot. I bet you have a dangerous side." She looked at him like he'd just grown a second head. Because what he actually did was take her casual interest in a popular podcast genre and turn it into some kind of psychological personality assessment. He'd met her 8 seconds ago and was already building a fantasy about who she was based on her Spotify queue. But here's where it gets truly unhinged. She gave him a polite, "Okay, nice to meet you," and put her earbud back in. Universal sign for this conversation is over. He sat down at her table, uninvited, just pulled out the chair across from her and started asking about her psychology, what makes her tick, what she's afraid of, whether she's figured herself out yet. She told him she was working and needed to focus. He said, "That's cool. I can just sit here. I like watching you think." I need you to understand the level of boundary violation happening here. He's essentially saying, your consent to this interaction is optional. I've decided we're having a moment, so we're having a moment. The barista had to ask him to leave after she discreetly signaled for help. His parting words are, "You're going to regret this when you realize how rare genuine connection is." What actually happened, she found out later from the barista that he did this every few days. Different women, same cable, same soundtrack to your life opener. He'd been asked to leave multiple times but kept coming back, always targeting women sitting alone with headphones. The headphones were part of his system. He saw them as a challenge, proof that he could break through someone's barriers. The coffee shop eventually banned him after he refused to stop. But the scariest part? He genuinely believed he was offering something valuable, that his unsolicited psychological analysis and physical presence were gifts these women should appreciate. The lesson here is, when someone ignores your first boundary, the headphones, the polite brush-off, the body language, they're showing you they'll ignore all the rest. And when they turn your normal interests into evidence of some deeper personality they've invented, they're not interested in knowing you, they're interested in the character they've cast you as in their head. The LinkedIn linebacker. Okay, this next one happened at a networking event. Professional setting, business casual attire, name tags, the whole thing. And this guy walks up to a woman with, "Are you a startup? Because I'd love to invest in you and watch you grow." First of all, and I cannot stress this enough, they're at a professional networking event. She's there to make business connections, not to be compared to a venture capital opportunity. But he's clearly been workshopping this line, probably thinks it's clever because it's relevant to the setting. She gave him the professional courtesy smile, you know the one, the smile that says, "I acknowledge you've spoken words at me," and introduced herself, mentioned her actual startup, tried to pivot to real business conversation. His response, "Oh, you're actually an entrepreneur. That's even better. Smart and beautiful. Dangerous combination." And there it is. He's just told her that her professional accomplishments are secondary to her appearance, that her intelligence is notable because it exists alongside being attractive, as if the two are usually mutually exclusive. But she needed to network, so she tried to push through. Told him about her company. SaaS platform, B2B sales. Actually interesting stuff. He interrupted her pitch to ask if she was single. At a networking event, while she's describing her business, he literally stopped her professional pitch to ask about her relationship status. She said she wasn't interested in discussing her personal life at a professional event. His response? He pulled out his phone, opened LinkedIn right there and sent her a connection request while maintaining eye contact, then said, "Now we're connected professionally, so we can talk about personal stuff." The audacity is genuinely breathtaking. He created a professional connection as a loophole to continue his romantic pursuit at a professional event where she explicitly stated she wanted to keep things professional. But wait, it gets worse. She declined the LinkedIn request immediately. He noticed because he was still standing there and said, "That's going to make it harder for your business to grow. I know a lot of investors." Let me translate that for you. He just threatened her professional opportunities because she wouldn't date him. Wrapped it in friendly language, but the message was clear. Reject me romantically, suffer professionally. What actually happened? She reported him to the event organizers. Turned out he'd been doing this at multiple networking events across the city. Same line, same pattern, same implied threat when rejected. He was banned from 3 professional organizations after multiple women came forward with similar stories. And here's the kicker. He wasn't actually an investor. He worked in middle management at a mid-sized company. No investment portfolio, no venture capital connections, nothing. The "I know investors" line was complete fiction designed to create leverage. The lesson: when someone blurs professional and personal boundaries after you've clearly stated your preference, they're not persistent, they're predatory. And when they imply that rejecting them romantically will have professional consequences, that's not networking. That's extortion with a LinkedIn profile. This one is genuinely bizarre. A woman is shopping in the produce section, picking out avocados, normal human grocery store behavior, and a guy approaches with, "You're choosing those avocados like someone who's been hurt before. Careful. Guarded. I can tell." I want you to sit with how insane that opener is. He's diagnosing her emotional trauma based on how she's selecting avocados. He looked at a woman squeezing fruit to check for ripeness and decided it was a metaphor for her relationship history. She laughed, because what else do you do when someone says something that unhinged, and said, "I just want ripe avocados." He leaned in closer. "But do you, though? Or are you afraid of what ripe really means?" At this point, she's trying to figure out if this is performance art or a mental health crisis. She's holding 2 avocados. This man is using them as props in some kind of amateur psychological analysis, and she cannot leave because her cart is blocking the aisle. He continued, "I'm very intuitive about people. I can read energy. Yours is closed off, defensive, but I see the real you underneath." She finally said, "I think you're reading too much into avocado selection," and tried to move past him. He touched her cart, not aggressively, just put his hand on it, preventing her from leaving, and said, "Why are you running? This is what you do, isn't it? Someone gets close and you shut down." Now she's genuinely scared because he's physically blocking her exit while claiming to know her psychological patterns based on literally nothing. He's not taking social cues, he's not respecting physical space, and he's building an entire personality profile that justifies why she should stay and talk to him. She firmly said, "Please move," and started pushing her cart. He let go, but followed her through 3 more aisles, staying about 10 feet back, occasionally calling out observations about her grocery choices. "You buy a lot of comfort food. You're filling a void. All those frozen meals, you don't let people cook for you, do you? The wine, that's how you cope. I could help with that." Another shopper noticed and asked if she was okay. The guy immediately backed off, put his hands up like he'd done nothing wrong, and left the store. What this means for you? When someone claims to have deep psychological insight into you based on 0 information, that's not intuition. That's projection. They're telling you about the character they need you to be to justify their behavior. And when they physically prevent you from leaving a conversation, that's not persistence, that's control. She reported him to store security. They checked cameras. He'd been in the store for 2 hours, wandering the aisles, watching women shop, waiting for someone alone to approach. The avocado line wasn't spontaneous. It was his opener. He had probably used variations on other women the same day. The lesson here is darker than the others. Some people use spiritual or intuitive language to mask predatory behavior. They're not reading your energy. They're testing your boundaries while making you feel like you're the closed-off one for being uncomfortable. If you're still watching, hit subscribe, because these next two are somehow even more unhinged. The parking lot poet. This story was told to me by someone who still gets anxious in parking lots because of it. She's walking to her car after a late shift around 10 p.m., keys already in hand, doing everything right. And a guy calls out from his car, 3 spaces down. "Excuse me, I just have to tell you something." She ignores him, correctly, and keeps walking. But he gets out of his car and follows, calling, "Wait, I wrote something for you." Now she's caught. Car is 30 feet away. He's between her and the exit. Parking lot is mostly empty. She stops, faces him, keeps distance, and says, "What?" He pulls out his phone and starts reading. A poem. "I wrote this while watching you walk. Her stride, a symphony, her hair, a darkened waterfall. She moves through space like she owns time itself." She's standing in a parking lot at night while a stranger reads her poetry he allegedly wrote in the 90 seconds since she left the building. And here's the thing about this specific situation. She can't tell if he's dangerous or just socially incompetent. So she has to decide: polite and potentially encourage him, or rude and potentially provoke him. She chose polite, said, "That's nice, thank you," and turned to leave. He said, "Wait, there's more. 3 more stanzas. You have to hear the whole thing." She said, "I really need to go." He said, "Why are women always in such a hurry? Can't you just receive a compliment? This is why you're probably single." And there it is, the turn. She didn't want his unwanted poetry in a dark parking lot, so now he's attacking her relationship status as punishment. The compliment was never a compliment. It was a test, and she failed by not being grateful enough. She got to her car, locked the doors immediately. He stood in the parking lot, still reading the poem out loud to no one, gesturing dramatically like he was on a stage. She called the non-emergency police line from her car, waited for them while he eventually got bored and left. The officer who responded told her this wasn't the first report about someone reading poetry to women in parking lots in that area. What actually happened? 3 other women had reported similar encounters over 6 weeks. Same basic pattern: late evening, parking lot, spontaneous poetry that was somehow already written. Police found him 2 weeks later doing it again. He had a notebook full of generic poems with blanks where he'd fill in hair color, clothing descriptions, whatever matched his current target. It wasn't art. It wasn't romance. It was a system designed to trap women in an interaction that they couldn't easily escape, then punish them for not being flattered by the attention. The birthday prophecy. Last one. And this might be the most manipulative of all because it sounds so harmless at first. A woman is at a bar with friends, celebrating her birthday. This guy approaches and says, "Let me guess your sign. I'm never wrong." Standard bar pickup line, right? Astrology angle, mystical vibe, gives him an excuse to talk to her. She humors him, says, "Okay, guess." He studies her face very seriously, like he's performing a medical diagnosis, then says, "Scorpio. Definitely Scorpio. Intense, passionate, but you've been hurt. You don't trust easily anymore." She laughs and says, "Nope, I am a Gemini." Here's where it gets weird. He doesn't miss a beat, says, "Oh, even better. Gemini means dual nature. You show one face to the world but hide the real you. I'm right, aren't I? You're here with friends, but you feel alone. Let me break down what just happened. He was wrong about her sign, which immediately disproves his I'm never wrong claim, but instead of accepting that, he pivoted to a different psychological read that's vague enough to apply to literally anyone. You feel alone sometimes is not profound insight. It's a universal human experience he's repackaging as personal observation. But it worked, because she did feel a little alone lately, and now she's wondering how he knew that. She didn't realize yet that he didn't know anything. He just said something statistically likely to be true and waited to see if it landed. He bought her a drink, asked about her birthday, her friends, her life, seemed genuinely interested, and then casually said, "You know what's interesting? We met on your birthday." That's significant. Cosmically, like the universe wanted us to meet today specifically. She's now operating under the belief that this encounter is somehow fated. He's taken a random Friday night at a bar and reframed it as destiny. They exchanged numbers. He texted her that night, "I can't stop thinking about what the universe is trying to tell us." Over the next week, he sent her daily horoscopes he claimed to write specifically for her. They were generic astrology copy-paste jobs from websites, but personalized with her name and references to their connection. When she didn't respond enthusiastically enough, he sent, "I see you're fighting the path the universe laid out. That's very Gemini of you, always running from what's real." Translation: "You're not responding how I want, so I'm going to use astrology to gaslight you into thinking your disinterest is a character flaw." She blocked him. He created new accounts, sent more horoscopes, more messages about cosmic significance, started showing up at the same bar on Friday nights, telling mutual acquaintances that they were connected, and she was just scared of what they had. What actually happened? Her friends confronted him, told him to stop. He claimed he was just following the signs and that she'd eventually realize what the universe was telling her. Bar staff banned him after he got aggressive with a bouncer who asked him to leave her alone. The lesson here is subtle but crucial. Manipulation doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes it looks like mysticism, like someone who claims the universe is speaking through them, who uses spiritual language to make their obsession sound like fate. When someone tells you that your discomfort with them is actually your fear of destiny, they're not enlightened. They're weaponizing belief systems to override your boundaries. 5 more pickup lines. 5 more previews of exactly who these people are. The Spotify guy who turned headphones into a personal challenge, the LinkedIn guy who threatened professional consequences for romantic rejection, the grocery store prophet who diagnosed trauma based on produce selection, the parking lot poet who used art to trap women in uncomfortable situations, and the birthday mystic who used astrology to justify ignoring your boundaries. Here's what connects all of them. They all reframed rejection as your problem. You're too closed off, too professional, too defensive, too busy, too scared of destiny. Never that they crossed a line, always that you failed to appreciate their approach. And that's the real warning. The pickup line is just the opening bid. What happens when you don't respond the way they want? That's the revelation. That's when you see who they really are. When someone shows you they can't handle a polite no, believe them the first time. When they turn your normal behavior into evidence of psychological damage they can fix, walk away. When they use mystical language, professional leverage, or artistic expression to keep you trapped in an interaction you don't want, that's not romance. That's control, wearing a pickup line as a mask. The first 5 seconds tell you everything. The question is whether you're willing to listen. Which of these 10 stories shocked you the most? First batch or second batch? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe to PMSR for more warnings disguised as entertainment, because every one of these actually happened to someone. Maybe not exactly like this, but close enough that you need to know what to watch for. See you next time, and trust your gut. always.